Yeah, my name is Holger Kessler. I am originally a physical geographer. I joined the British Geological Survey, the BGS, in '98. Became a mapper. I was still part of the old style survey, pen and paper. I started in Chroma and Sheringham, mapping with Morlock and Hamblin and Steve Booth, who some of you might know. And then gradually got into, well, we also then moved into Vale of York and started on digital mapping and digital modeling and visualization. And yeah, I ended up leading a small IT team in the BGS. And then for the last 3 years, I seconded to the Geospatial Commission, which is located in the Cabinet Office. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So my talk is going to be about connecting the natural and built environment, or if you sort of look at it as a geographer, it's really the physical geography and the human geography. So not just the built environment, but also the human environment, which is sort of nicely portrayed there by a great poster, which is actually available all for free online to get kids into survey. So this massive interaction of built, natural, and human environment is the essence of my talk. But of course, being from the BGS, let's start with what was the geological map and what was geology all about at the very beginning. Well, you all know all this history, but I just thought I'll put the Survey Act up that formed the BGS as its own entity, previously obviously part of the Ordnance Survey. And yes, it says it was an act to facilitate the completion of a geological survey. And of course, this is a show back at BGS when we had visitors, and hopefully soon we'll have some visitors again on site. I always show this act and say, it was then thought that we could have a completed map at some point. And of course, we always get teased about that. Why is it not complete? Well, it's not complete because things change, demands change, purposes change, and knowledge changes, insights, knowledge, understanding of processes. And also we get increasingly more data, both from the subsurface, but also recent developments in INSAR and satellite information and so on. So it was never going to be completed. It is an ongoing survey. And here, it's a bit of a theme running through tonight. This is a really interesting, and I've put on, I will share the slides. You've got the recording, and I've got on each slide, you've got a web link to the resources I'm showing. A really, really interesting piece of an artifact here that I believe the Museum of Wales, Library of Wales, sorry, has rescued the original of this. The first economic justification of the Geological Survey that de la Beige submitted. And I absolutely love this because, and our economists at the Cabinet Office like this as well, because it was very clear that the Geological Survey was there to help us with building roads, finding water, digging canals, building structures, and helping with land use or agriculture. And I think it's just fantastic that really nothing has much changed. I mean, you could add some geohazards, you could add contamination. So there are, of course, a few, but in general, it was very clear then and still now what a geological survey or the understanding of geology was important for. And in many of those, of course, we have many of those themes. It is the interaction of the subsurface and the properties with some human interaction and human infrastructure. So that was 1835, 1845. We had literally a man on his horse starting this map. But where are we now? We are now in, this is a government publication which shows the UK Research and Development Roadmap. And it shows the government departments, and I think Nigel is on the call, who is my old friend and colleague who invited me kindly here. So Nigel is right over here in the Environment Agency. and I am right over there in the British Geological Survey. And you can see in between, you can see the sort of compartmentalization of science and research and agencies, and it's just the mind boggles. And this is I've just shared this actually with the team at the Cabinet Office. This is only these are only the central government, the Whitehall departments and their research agencies. There are also regional and devolved administrations, and there were the universities as well, and the geological societies and the learned societies and the professional bodies. So the landscape is hugely disparate, and that's going to also be a theme of my talk today. So, for example, here we have the need for geological information, and then here we have the production. But look how far away these departments and people potentially are from each other, all in individual offices and agencies. And of course, what we are trying to solve, and increasingly, this is it's clear to everyone, and a sort of little pitch here for geographers in particular. This has been clear for a long time. Geographers often accused by the hardcore geologists as being just a master of nothing and a jack of all trades and all that sort of stuff. When I first joined BGS, I was in fact the first geographer and first German geographer, I hasten to add. And yeah, we get sort of mocked at times, but we got the fact a long time that it's a system that is interlinked. And the geological system and the hydrogeological system is only a part of this ridiculously complicated planetary system that we are in desperate need to understand and to predict, and in order to prepare for the future. So you've just seen where the research and development and the mapping and the surveying sits. All is disparate, but actually everything is interlinked. And I know I've just run these slides past my team, and there are a lot of words here, but I hope you can just, I didn't know which ones to cut out. It's a great quote, which basically is suggesting that really the traditional scientific boundaries and silos that we've created might not actually be fit for purpose anymore. And I strongly believe that. I think integration and cross-disciplinary working is absolutely essential. There's no point anymore to go and just do your own thing. It is just you might solve one problem in particular depth, but you're not going to solve a problem across the discipline boundaries. So as the theme of the talk is the built environment in particular, here we have to cross boundaries with civil engineers, for example, and architects. And here we have all the natural sciences and how they are actually all interlinked. And I have this slide, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but I just wanted to put this slide on. We have a nice publication by the BGS as well, by Peter Allen, who was an AD, an assistant director 10, 15 years ago. We have a similar publication. We have this here is the Geological Survey of Canada, and we have the various industrial revolutions down at the bottom here, and we have sort of driving policies, sort of global issues, and like World War I, World War II, oil crisis, and then we have scientific methods and enabling technology, which I found really interesting, and you can just see we're now here somewhere. And suddenly we have up here popping up in the technology these terms here: artificial intelligence or machine learning, you might have heard, and we have this term of digital twin appearing, which I'm going to just go into a little bit. So we are on a journey, as a geological survey, and now increasingly, as I will show in the next few slides, it's about building this digital twin and this joint understanding of the planet and its systems with others, and not just creating the map that William Smith created, which is effectively standalone. So digital twin, I was just going to throw in here a picture and a slide from a different, completely different discipline, and that is that Formula One is used often in talks about to explain what a digital twin is. A digital twin is basically a computer model or program, or you can say a bit of data that you can visualize, that is connected to a real world object or a real world process. There's a bit of academic debate whether it could also be a future, a concept, but let's just stick to the Formula One car. You basically have, this car is equipped with sensors. We also have meteorological sensors. We know about the weather, we know the tarmac temperature. And whilst the real car is being driven around the track, the engineers have a simulation of previous races and the behaviors, but also at the same time the real-time information from the car and the tarmac and the other cars, and can therefore make predictions seconds ahead, minutes ahead, or hours ahead in terms of, like, say, rainfall forecast, and make decisions about this car within, as I said, within seconds. Why is this relevant? It's relevant because we are building increasingly, and this is where geology comes in, and some may argue, and I have discussed this philosophically, whether a map, a topographic or a geological map, is also a part of a digital twin. It is to some degree. The difference is this feedback. So a true digital twin has sensors, like if you take a groundwater well, it has a piezometer, say, and then you have telemetry, and if that groundwater telemetry would feed your groundwater model and would be linked in real time, then you could say that is actually then a full digital twin. But we are creating parts of this digital twin with our geological maps and models. And Europe, so the EU, but also other parts of the world, Australia, lots is going on over there, are setting out to build digital twins of the entire Earth, and that's of course driven as often by the meteorological community. So we have meteorological models around the globe, which are informed in real time by measurements, and are continuously updated and forecast. So bringing this back to the Earth and the ground this is an interesting organization called the Centre for Digital Built Britain, which I have been involved with now over a number of years. Initially through the BGS, we had a small research stint where we modeled, together with civil engineers and building researchers, we modeled the heat exchange between buildings and the ground using data in London. So modeling the thermal conductivity of the London clay and the gravels and assessing groundwater flow, and then coupling that with building models and the heat that gets ejected from basements. So we did a small bit of research with Cambridge as BGS then, but since then I've been interacting with the CDBB, Centre for Digital Built Britain, quite a lot, because they have this vision which sometimes seems like 20 years away, to build a digital twin of the UK. And that digital twin doesn't just include, and you are all probably looking here for geology, okay, so the geology is sort of hiding maybe somewhere in this green part over here. It is very much focused at the moment, it's focused on the built environment, Digital Built Britain. As you'll see in a few slides later, we are, at least in the room here, we're talking to these people and we're beginning to explain that really all this infrastructure sits on the geology and the soil and the archaeology and the groundwater. So we're there, we're talking at least, and we're beginning to say, okay, we need to couple. Okay, we can't just have a digital twin of the rail and the buses, and that's all great. Bus timetables, real time, smart energy networks, driverless cars. That's all great, but what about the interactions with the subsurface? So it's a website I encourage you to have a look at and get into, to see what the civil engineering and the construction industry is up to. And I will be coming back to this part in a couple of slides when I talk to you briefly about what we're doing what I'm doing in my current role at the Cabinet Office. So, as I said, I was seconded 3 years ago to the Geospatial Commission, which is a team of 50 people or so inside Cabinet Office looking at, as it says, unlocking location data, map data. So the BGS, Urban Survey, Landreg are all partner bodies, and we all have bits and pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, like I said in the slide earlier on. We are all our little compartments and departments, and we need to really piece these parts together to make smarter decisions. And this is our strategy, which I also encourage you to have a look at. And you can see here one of these usual stacks, how you have data about the subsurface, the oceans as well. Of course, we have the UK Hydrographic Office as a partner body, and all of these layers need to be made increasingly accessible in order to answer policy questions, environmental questions, health questions, etc., etc. So I encourage you afterwards to take a look. If you don't know anything about the Geospatial Commission, to have a look at that, or of course ask questions later. So as one slide, a general slide about what we're doing in the Commission is described by this. So you have this concept of FAIR, which is finding, accessing, interoperable and reusable. And this is really the backbone of what we're doing at the Commission. We are basically, we know that organizations like local authorities or planners or home builders or highways authorities, agricultural sector, wherever you go, people struggle to find stuff. So it's really good data sets exist. Again, I'm going to pick on the Environment Agency. A fantastic piece of work was to make the LiDAR, so our elevation model for the United Kingdom, open. But often still people don't even know it exists and can't find it. And when they can find it, they can probably not access it because it might be too large, or there might be a cost associated. There might be a complex licensing arrangement. Or it might be in a file format that you don't have a software for, so it's not interoperable. And then critical up here, this usable is LiDAR was gathered for one purpose, but we want to maybe reuse it for another. It was gathered maybe for flood risk mapping by the Environment Agency, but then geomorphologists want to use it for landslide monitoring, but then you might not have the right timestamp on it, and in issues like that. So that was just a quick slide to show you what the Commission is doing. So we're trying to make data sets across the country more fair. And back to the subsurface. So this is my current role. This is the underground asset register, which we're going to create in the next 3 years. We have no single access point for utilities and their operators and contractors to access the maps about the maps of utilities. So this is the prototype from last year that shows a junction in London, and in one view you get access to all telco, gas, water, electricity assets. And this is the sort of that shows there. That picture shows in a nutshell. You know, we made things findable, accessible, and interoperable, and then we can start to say, okay, if we've got this map, well, we can intersect that at some point in the future with the soil properties. We can bring in the trees, we can bring in basements, and just make the job of works on the roads safer and more efficient. So this is what you're seeing here. This is the real world buried infrastructure outside on my road, and this effectively is its digital twin. So we will soon have a completely digitalized version, replica, with its caveats. Of course, not all accurate, not all positions of these cables will be completely accurate, just like any map that is a representation of the reality. But back to this slide here, this is where I'm working at the moment, to digitize existing assets in the subsurface. So how can that help us? And this is one of my most favorite case studies. This is a piece of work. Again, if I won't go into the slide. Actually, I'll just go into this. I'll go into this slide briefly. So this is a study by Arup in conjunction with the BGS on behalf of TfL Crossrail, and as part of this design study, so the outline design study, this is all available. The links is on the slide. They created a 3D model of all the buildings above the outline design. They created they had obviously the tunnel design in 3D. They then did a clash detection, okay, with the tunnel design. So there it is, and you can see that's the result. So these houses and their piles and foundation might be intersecting or be near the tunnel design. So you can see the risk ranking here. So it's a clash, it's high risk, and it's at low risk at a certain distance from the center of the tunnel. And then you have other utilities. So here you can now see the three-dimensional outlines of other existing Royal Mail tunnels, major sewers, and so on and so forth. So we are able to now, and then this final slide is my absolute favorite, we then not only can intersect the 3D tunnel design, the utilities, and the basements, but we also can intersect it with the geological predictive model taken from the BGS. And where they didn't have information about depth of piles or depth of basements, they actually used the informed geological interpretation to estimate how deep the foundations and how deep the piles are based on experience of similar situations. Will they stay in London clay? Did they have to go through the fallence into the chalk, depending on the building height which they had and on the geotechnical properties. So a true sort of 3D GIS analysis to come up with the output being this risk rating of the structures above the tunnel design. So really exciting. And then the next example is from the Netherlands, and I'm just going to again have a website here. Again, this is all open, and you can play with this in your own time. This is a story map of a part of Netherlands where they had a serious problems with this road here. Gives you the story, gives you so it's both a interactive map, giving you abilities to look at terrain models, LiDAR, soil map, and again, right, all of this data here is being streamed from accessible sources. So this is not frozen. These are all web services. But not only can you see, okay, historic maps, all this sort of stuff, everything is in the right place. You know, this is a GIS over here, and here you've got the narrative, you've got the boreholes, the groundwater, boreholes. So here's you can play with all of that. But then it gets even better. So we then have the geological model, and it explains you here how the geological model was built. So you've got clay, peat, and sand. And this was built for the public and for the designers and the mayor to understand why this route might be a better one than this, to do with the thickness of peat and the also the associated uncertainties. So I just wanted to show you this, and again, this is not preset. This is real-time data coming in from the various sources, the geological survey. And here you can start to see, so I've got some views here, how the bridge design and the piles interact with the 3D, in this case, a voxel model, so it's a 3D pixelated model of the subsurface, and how you've got the peat beds and the sand units, and importantly, and this is what the Dutch, of course, are very proud of, the associated uncertainties. So higher certainties in these red areas and lower uncertainties in the blue areas. And not only that, you can also, if I just zoom into the surface, yeah, so you can view that that you've got the 3D house building models. And what I also like to always point out, in the Netherlands, we also have a nationwide data set of trees. So this really shows how, if we all do our job, and I showed you that map of where all the different departments and surveys and organizations are, if we do our job and talk to each other and think about each other and make our data interoperable and shareable and findable, then we can soon start to do things like that. You know, look at the natural and built environment in conjunction to make better decisions about, in this case, the design of a road, or in the previous example, the design of the Crossrail tunnel. Two more examples, which I won't click on now. You can again do that in your own time, but just so you've heard of them, as part of my work in the last sort of 5 or 10 years, the more we got into urban geology and the built environment. The other two case studies that stand out are Singapore. Singapore, of course, is constrained with space, and that is to some degree also the reason why the Netherlands are very much leading here. They also are constrained with space, and also have the sea to one side and in between. And here you have a very visionary plan for digital underground for Singapore, where they are beginning to actually segregate the subsurface into the various compartments of putting our infrastructure underground. Reservoirs, flood reservoirs, or drinking water reservoirs, the tunnels and the various, but also waste disposal and so on, air conditioning and so on, and even still doing mining at depth. It's a conceptual model, but you can get the point. And where this is being put into practice, and we've been interacting quite a lot with the city of Helsinki, who again is a real world leader in that. They have one of the first 3D plans. So when we have our spatial plan, if you look into your local plans, there is of course no reference to the subsurface, to the geology, other than maybe groundwater vulnerability or potentially groundwater flooding. But apart from that, there's no subsurface spatial plan, not even in our densest city, London, Manchester, Glasgow. Whereas in Helsinki, what you see here, these outlines are they are three-dimensional corridors in the subsurface that have been held as space for future underground development, just as this conceptual model shows here. And they are related to the geology. Obviously, in this case, we have a relatively, it's not simple, it's a two-layer geology quaternary over granite and hard bedrock, but there are weathering zones, there are fractures, there's undulating bedrock, and they have taken a geological view and preserved certain areas of the city of Helsinki. And back to London, is of course, has been talked about many times, that of course the best tunneling medium in London is the London clay. It's also protecting the groundwater, and should we not potentially think here natural built environment together and say, well, actually we do need to consider this as a really important layer and not interfere with it too much, and potentially regulate and keep certain corridors of the London clay open for future tunneling. So coming towards the end, this is a really, really good piece of work by the Construction Leadership Council, and you can see the organizations here, many of the learned societies, also good to see the EA in there, have come together, and the BAYs, so some government, local professional bodies and societies have come together and produced this document, Our Vision for the Built Environment. And I'm particularly pleased that geology has crept in. So we have the natural environment usually being thought of by the civil engineers as this bit. We have at least a little chunk over here where you can see into the ground, and we need to get a lot more people I work with here from the built environment, they need a lot more people like myself, like you, to reach out either through lectures and through the learned societies, like the ICE, for example, or at work to cross, secondments is what I think is a very important thing, to just cross the boundaries and educate each other why it is important to also know about the subsurface. Because here, this diagram is just sums it really all up. We have the built systems and the human systems, we have the natural systems, and really they provide a service, and they need to come together to have good outcomes for ourselves. If we treat them in isolation, we will not get the desired outcomes for the next for the next challenges that are around the corner. So this slide is might seem a little bit random, but it is my favorite slide from the Cabinet Office. These are the core values of my new home. They are really so important for what I talked about from the beginning, which is the interaction between teams, disciplines, and departments need to increase a lot more, and they need to be built on these principles. So we need to give others a voice and include people and respect them for what they know, and not say, well, here comes some sort of geographer, or what do they know, and build trust. And in particular here, geologists are called for here. They need to be seen and be recognized. And then, as the theme of the whole talk and that last slide, we need to work together a lot more across silos and across boundaries. So, and my sort of favorite slides of the link to our current pandemic is, if we don't, we have absolutely no chance to flatten this curve that's heading our way. We absolutely need to work across disciplines, and in particular with the engineers and the people who build the built environment. Thanks for listening, and yeah, back to you.